Well, again, welcome. It's great for us to be able to gather together, and we are in this Easter season. But these central characters in the gospel lesson for this morning are not in Easter. They are still coming out of the events of Good Friday and Holy Week. These are two, not of the 12 disciples, but they certainly were in the next outer ring of people who were with Jesus. They saw him. They followed him. They were devoted to him. They loved him. And they saw then the events that happened during Holy Week. They saw him come into the city of Jerusalem. They saw him betrayed. They saw him arrested. They saw him beaten. They saw him hung on the cross and his body taken down. They knew that he'd been buried in the tomb, and so they walked along. They were leaving on that Easter Sunday morning. They were leaving Jerusalem and making their way back home to Emmaus, a village about 7 miles away. And a stranger comes up and begins a conversation with them. So what are you talking about? And they rehearse the events of that past week and Good Friday, like everybody must have known what had happened. And they say we had hoped that he was the one who would come and redeem Israel, that is, liberate Israel. He would be our leader, and yet our hopes were dashed. It didn't work out that way. There's this confusing thing about not being able to find his body, and we don't know what to think about all of that. But it has been a strange time, and strange times continue, don't they? I mean, in our own time, this time of the coronavirus, how can it not be strange? So I'm standing here with a couple great friends who are supporters to help make this all happen, but I'm surrounded here with like nobody other than these friends who are helping to provide for the technology. So chairs that are empty. So we fortunately, thanks to your generosity through the capital campaign, we have the equipment that allows us to be able to connect with each other. But I've told others, I've never been so grateful for technology and so frustrated by it. It's wonderful to be able to see somebody's face on a screen, but it's not the same as seeing them face to face. It's one thing to be able to reach out and touch the screen. But it's nowhere like being able to reach out and touch the people that you love. This frustrating time, frightening time, that we continue to kind of walk through these days together. It's easy to feel empathy with these disciples who are really struggling here, and their experience is just kind of heavy and depressing. And yet, this stranger suddenly kind of takes them to task. He says, in one translation, you foolish people, you're so slow to believe the things that you were told. Now, if we said to somebody, you're a fool, that would be a pretty harsh slap. But for them, during their time, we have to do a little bit of translating for us. And I think of a teacher of mine in high school who, if I was impatient trying to work through a bunch of math problems and just trying to get them done and making a bunch of mistakes, he would come over and he'd put his hand on my head and just kind of tussle my hair like this. He'd just say, "You silly. Just slow down. Just slow down. You're capable of doing this. Just slow down and take your time, and you won't make as many mistakes. It'll be okay." And I kind of hear that tone, this affection that comes from this stranger for them. And he takes them through the promises of the Old Testament. He said, "Don't you remember, didn't you know that the Messiah needed to go through all of these things? in order to be able to accomplish the mission of God. You know, the mission of God is not just simply to get the Romans out of Jerusalem for you. The mission of God is the salvation of the world. And these things had to happen. And so he takes them through the Old Testament, through the books of Moses from the very beginning, and takes them through the prophets and all of these echoes, these things that had been promised for them. That Jesus, the Messiah, needed to be able to suffer in order to fulfill God's promise and in order to be raised to new life and to be able to accomplish the salvation of the world. The big stuff that needed to be able to get done. You know, promises are so incredibly important for us as we're going through times of confusion, as we're in the fog of doubt all around us. We don't know where we're going. We don't know what's going on around us. To be able to have promises that can shine a beam of light and provide direction for us so that we know where to go. And so to be able to spend time in Scripture. That's why we just kind of over and over, Father Christian and I, over and over, we keep on talking about why it's so important to know Scripture, so that we can know the promises of God's love and let those promises cut through the fog of our experience, so that we can know that Jesus and his love and his presence are constantly with us. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and lowly of heart, and you shall find rest for your souls. These promises of God's love, the refreshment of Jesus, from the very beginning of the Old Testament through into the New Testament, that speak to us, that cut through the fog and allow us to be able to know where we're going and have a sense of purpose and direction, even though our experience is very confusing. And so later on, these disciples would say, you know, did our hearts not burn within us as we were having this conversation with him on the road? Did we not know that the Spirit of God was working in us, that something was bubbling in us? There was a sense of assurance and comfort and joy that was in us as he was talking about those promises, as Jesus must have talked with them many, many times before. This sense of comfort and joy that's there. Did our hearts not burn within us at this talk of this firm direction and compassion for us? And so these disciples keep on walking. And finally, it's been a long day. So it's Easter Sunday. It had been in the morning. They had a 7-mile journey. They have all of the confusion of all of the stories about his body being missing. It had been a long weekend and a long day. They must have been exhausted. And so they finally come to their house, and this stranger makes like he's going to keep on going. And they say, No, you can't go. You got to come and stay with us. Stay with us. The day is spent. So you don't want to go. You want to come and stay with us. Now, that's an interesting thing, isn't it? I don't know about you, but there are a lot of times in my life when I'm dog tired at the end of a long day, and even though something's going on inside of me, a little stirring that's going on, I'm ready to just kind of cut it loose and just say, it's been great. So thank you for kind of spending the time with us. Stay safe on your journey. You go ahead, and I can't wait to just kind of grab a bite and jump in the sack and just be zoned out of the world. I can't tell you the numbers of times that I've done that, and yet these guys are listening to this cry in their heart, this burning, what I call the Christian heartburn, this burning of the Spirit inside of them, and they listen to that and they say, No, we can't. We got to hang on to this. Something important is happening. You got to come in. You got to be with us. And so they invite Jesus in. Jesus does not force himself in. Jesus doesn't break the door down. Jesus is going to go on without them. But they listen to what's going on by the Spirit inside of them, and they invite him in to come into the house, to be there with them. So the promises are so important for us, but the promises are what lead us to the presence of Jesus with us, so that we can recognize his presence, so that we can recognize that he's there as we listen to what's going on in our hearts, and we can hear him and we can see him, and he can now walk with us through these difficult, hard times. His presence, not just his promises, but his presence being able to be there with us, that will walk us through. When I was a priest in my first parish, back in Michigan, there was a young couple who were pregnant for the first time, and they were excited. They had made preparations for this baby coming. They were really ready to be first-time parents, and then something went tragically wrong, and the baby died within her womb. And this sober realization that the baby wasn't going to be with them, and she was going to need to give birth, and she and her husband there holding hands as that happened. Now it would have been easy for them to be able to say, so where is God in this? Where's the presence of Jesus in this? I don't see it. There was such promise. We were so excited, and it's just gone. And so he can't be real. All of these promises, everything it's just not for us. It would have been very easy for them to kind of lose faith and doubt and just allow the fog, the darkness to crowd in. But that's not what they did. They welcomed the presence of Jesus and relied on his promises for them. And so Jesus was there as that baby was born. Jesus was there. They had a little pond out behind their house, and they brought that baby home. And I stood there with them, and I took a handful of water out of the pond and baptized that little baby, and then went with them to the funeral home. The presence of Jesus walked with them every single step of the way, and they felt his love surrounding them. They had a sense of direction, and they had a sense of purpose, and they knew that Jesus' tears were there with them, comforting them and seeing them through. So Jesus, for these struggling disciples, came into their house, and he acted like a guest. And so they sat at a table, and he took one of the chairs, and they gave him the bread, and he took the bread, and he blessed it, and he broke it, and he gave it to them. And in that moment, it says their eyes were opened, and they understood who this stranger was. This is not just a stranger, but this is the very presence of Jesus himself. Jesus was there, had been there with them in this journey all the entire time. Jesus was there in their house, and in the moment that they recognized, he's gone. He's gone. He disappears. And it's like, well, how is that? That's not fair. That is not fair. Finally, we understand who you are, and now you're gone. Now, wouldn't you think that they'd be a little bit ticked off by that Jesus would just be gone now, finally at the big moment, and now he's gone? But their experience is just the opposite. They're just overfilled with joy and excitement. Not because Jesus is gone, but because Jesus will never be gone from them. Jesus will never be gone from them. He will always be there, wherever they are. And so as they invited him into their house, Jesus was there, but he wasn't a guest. He was, in fact, the host of that meal. As they sat down at the table, he was the one who was providing the gifts. As they ate the meal, he was the one who gave it meaning and focus and who turned everything upside down from despair into hope and the opportunity for love and for joy. And so for us, even as we gather in this sacred space, this church, whether it's the traditional church or this one, this sacred space, but this exists and is sacred only because the house in which you live is sacred. It reminds us and stands forever as a testament to the presence of Jesus in your house, not just this one, your house. And when you sit around a table, it's an echo of this table right here. This table, which reminds us of the presence of Jesus that's always with us, and it stands as a symbol of the fact that he is with us around your table as you gather with your family members and you say a prayer before a meal. It's not just thanking Jesus for the gifts, but thanking Jesus for being the host. He's the one who sits there with you and brings the family together. And as you eat that meal, it's a reminder of this meal, which is his body and blood given for us that we might live. And so every slice of bread that you eat in your home and every drink that you drink is a reminder of this meal given by the hands of our host that is filled with his love and his grace, his mercy, his contentment, and his peace, as he invites us to join with him in his banquet, in his celebration. Oh, no. So these tired disciples all of a sudden aren't so tired anymore. They can't wait. Now they pack everything up and they run back another 7 miles to go back to Jerusalem, and they find those disciples there. And those disciples are gathered together and find out that they've had the same experience of a resurrected Jesus who's been there with them, and they tell them this story about this conversation on the road and the breaking of bread, and there's this community of joy and optimism and hope that all of a sudden comes together because of the presence of Jesus. And it's what happens for us as we experience the presence of Jesus, his new life that is all around us. He brings us together as a community to be able to shine his light in a very confused and foggy world, to shine his light that gives presence and direction and meaning and promise and hope and a future, things for us to work on, not because we oughta, but because we wanna, because we're his. Seeing these signs of new life all around us that come because of his resurrection hope. Where do you see new life around you? Things that are being raised up because of the presence of Jesus around you. Let me challenge us this week to do one of these experiments together. Let me challenge you to, these phones of ours, that can be constantly updating us on all of the bad news of the things that are going on around us, to be able to constantly find ways of using them to bring new life and resurrection power into the relationships of the people that we've got. So let me encourage you to look around, and each day this week, to be able to find something that says to you new life, something new. It could be a thing. It could be a blossom on a tree. It could be a new baby that's been born. It could be a new book that maybe all of a sudden you've gotten some kind of new insight or new revelation that's come to you. It could be a new relationship. It could be, who knows? Where is it that the presence of the resurrected Lord is raising up something new in you that brings hope and promise of a future? take a picture of that and send it to me. You'll see in the news and events, there's also a little blurb there that gives you an email address to send it to. So you can send it there, you can send it to me, and we're going to put those things together and create an Instagram photo album, kind of a video that we'll be able to look at. Hopefully we'll have it ready by next weekend, and we'll be able to share together about this testimony, this confidence that we have in the Lord, who is the Lord of new life and new resurrection, new promise, and new ways of being able to live into a bright and beautiful future. Don't you allow the fog of the present circumstances to kind of confuse you and make you question who you are. You are the sons and daughters of the Most High King, the risen Lord. And so we affirm together as his community of joy that we live by him, we live by him, we live by him, and allow him to feed us everything that we need and to bask in his presence. Thanks be to God. So let's, I don't know where you're at, but I invite you to stand together.